Rarely do we hear that cutting trees is a good thing.
It's extremely good for the forest.
Elkington Forest, a development near Shawnigan Lake, is as unique as the houses built from these aging trees.
This is an example of traditional timber framing. Beams that are held together with an oak spline that goes right through the middle. There's no metal fasteners.
Barry Gates says Vancouver Island forests are disappearing.
Clear-cut forest doesn't produce clean water, doesn't produce wildlife habitat.
But by selectively cutting a small percentage of trees, Doug Makaroff says they're actually conserving a forest.
As far as we know, there isn't any other way. It's basically homesteading in the 21st century. Family room, media room, one-bedroom bath.
Doug is the president of Living Forest Communities.
And the ensuite is upstairs.
Barry calls himself an eco-forester.
We were born to live.
International singer-songwriter Anne Mortefi is the president and chair of the Trust for Sustainable Forestry. Together, the developer, the woodsman, and the visionary are conserving Elkington Forest by building what they call a living forest community on this 1,000-acre plot.
We realized we were in this hard place. We were between the preservationists and developers.
Building lots are readying for 77 homes, 15 businesses, and a fire hall. 65 acres will become agricultural land for food production. The remaining trees, the residents' backyard.
This is the only free market model that we know of to take out the timber over a longer period of time and in a more gentle way, a more sustainable way.
This clustered residential hamlet will occupy 15% of the forest. The balance will be conservation land while still allowing for eco-forestry.
85% conservation locked up in covenants, which means that it'll continue to produce ecologically in perpetuity.
Stumpage fees will finance the Trust for Sustainable Forestry.
The brakes on the developer, and the developer is the opportunity for the trust to make its money.
This lumber came from the trees cut for the development, helping to keep this nearby mill running. Barry says Elkington foresters cut trees selectively.
Single tree, group tree selection.
A harvest method that maintains the forest, a method practiced before industrialized clear cutting.
Roughly 10 logging loads on this entire 1,000-acre property. And that's actually providing a little bit of growing opportunity for what we leave behind.
Elkington Forest, they say, will remain an oasis, fringed by an expanding, barren landscape. Dr. Elkington purchased this land over 60 years ago, after it was clear-cut.
He could envision what it would look like and what it could look like, and he said, leave it alone, it'll come back, and that's what it did.
Doug says that when the family inherited the land, they had a choice to make.
Industrial forestry is the only real use for the land, and so the degradation, the erosion, the siltation will happen.
Instead, they chose to conserve Grandpa Elkington's legacy. But how?
Many of the land trusts simply aren't able to raise the millions of dollars that would be required to purchase a piece of land like this.
We had a tough challenge in terms of producing the economics and the legacy, and we did it.
Anne says a similar development on nearby Cortez Island has so far proven successful.
So we basically were able to save 94% of the land. We've got some old growth trees there and thriving little communities.
Cabinet maker, there's a guy who puts together windows, flooring, custom doors. There are a number of people making a livelihood from the mill that is up at that conservation community.
Barry is convinced that the Elkington model could eventually expand to similar properties on the South Island.
So that Shawnigan, which once had a very, very proud logging history and milling history, would actually go back and recapture part of that.
Doug says that zoning, a 200-year management plan, and the land covenant will ensure that Elkington stays green.
I see a day that there's going to be living forest communities all over BC and people really wanting to live there.
We're in a little bit of trouble, and we need to learn how to relate to nature one more time.
I think there's going to become a time when people are going to say, no, we have to do it differently.
South of Shawnigan Lake,
We're hoping that this is really a disruptive innovation in terms of real estate and in terms of forestry.
I'm Paul Beilstein.